keep watching throughout tonight. Really excited for all the runs we have going on. And I think I'll just go ahead and pass it off to the Variety Pack to set us into the run.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, hello everyone, my name is A Variety Pack, and today we'll be playing Bayonetta 2 Any Percent. You might be familiar with the titular character, Bayonetta, but we're actually going to be playing a different unlockable character named Rosa today. I'll explain her characteristics as we get into the game, which should be able to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. So,
let's go.
Any percent Rosa easy. Now, what does that mean? That's sort of a mouthful of a category name. So we're playing as Rosa, who is canonically intended to be Bayonetta's mother. She has this really, really powerful ability that she just deals 3 times as much damage as Bayonetta and 2 times as much damage as Jean. There's an ostensible drawback to this. She's supposed to take 3 times as much damage as well. Although, we're playing on easy, so the damage is never really to be that much of a concern for us. We're really just going to be tearing through the entire game. It's going to be very flashy, I promise. It'll be super fun. If you've never played a Bayonetta game before, there's a couple things that you should know going into it, and we can demonstrate this at the intro prologue here. Basically, we'd like to combine a bunch of punches and kicks to get a bunch of different combos off. That's how you would normally play this game. Unfortunately, because Rosa's just super overpowered, there's really no reason to get all fancy with your combos. And so, as you can see, we even have this gigantic mech here that we're going to be using quite frequently. In fact, I would say that there's about 5-ish things to keep an eye on if you're not super familiar with how this run works. There's going to be a punch-kick-punch combo. That's the sort of our bread and butter combo. And there's also a combo that we can do with our mech here, where we do punch-punch and then hold this last punch out. Generally speaking, the guns in this game will do a little bit more damage on average, just DPS-wise than anything else. Just because, you have 2 fists going instead of just 1 at any given time. So, punch, punch, hold that last punch because we have 2 fists going. That's double the bullets, double the DPS right there. We're going to be stuck in this mech for a little bit. There will be sort of occasional points where there's going to be a lot of small enemies around us, and we're going to do punch, punch, and then a dodge back. That dodge back obviously lets us dodge enemies, but it also lets us do this very important thing, which is restart our combo. If you finish that combo with that punch, you see there's like a gigantic delay before I can actually start moving again. So by dodging back, we're able to do 2 punches and then just quickly dodge back, so we don't have to wait for that last big punch if we don't really need it.
Aesir pitied the humans for their naivete.
There's that punch, punch, punch combo again. And you'll also see that I'm actually glowing purple. This purple is what we call Umbran Climax, and you can activate it when you're in human form as well as in your mech form. What that basically does is, as human form, it will turn you into the mech. And if you are in mech form, you'll get super mech form. So lots of damage is going to be tossed around today. There's a couple other attacks that we're going to be doing. One of them involves running around in this tiger form. We can do I don't know if you saw that on the screen. There's a claw slash that we do out of that transformation. That's really useful for getting really close into enemies and doing a lot of damage immediately. There are, I would say, 2 other combos that we can really use throughout this run. One of them, if we can get out of this, is our kick, punch, 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 kick, kick, kick combo, but we're literally only going to see that twice in the entirety of the run, so don't pay too much attention to that one. The other one involves a bird, and it involves some feathers. We're not quite ready to get there yet, but it'll be there soon. Alright, we made it out of the records of time. Very common for the Bayonetta series, and we'll make our way into the prologue, the world of chaos. Alright, skip some cutscenes, and we'll get to start with exactly what I said. This is our bread and butter combo, our punch, kick, punch. On this little airplane that we're just currently standing on, all we need to do is do one of them, and it'll knock them off the screen, and it'll take them out. We will be doing quite a few punch, kick, punch combos as we go along, and you'll see me dance like that every so often. That's not just for show. It is actually a taunt. And what taunting does is it retains that combo meter that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. The point of that is so that we don't have to reset and we get to make this combo go as big as possible. We would like this combo to actually stay until we get around 7,000. If I drop it, it's not the end of the world. It would be really nice to not have that happen, though. The reason for that is for every single number that gets added to this counter, your resulting Halo score, which you'll see on the top right-hand side of the screen, will increase exponentially. And we have a lot of shopping to do right at Chapter 1, so we're going to make sure that we have as many Halos as humanly possible. You'll also see on the top left-hand side of the screen that we have a green bar that indicates our health, and we also have some weird purple circles. Those purple circles are representative of our magic. When we have a full bar of magic, which is what it's currently showing that we have 2 of them, we can activate that Umbran Climax, as you can see on the bottom side of the screen right now. Not too big of an issue right now because there are no big enemies and we really want to get that combo meter up. With this punch kick punch combo, we can basically spam a lot of things. By hitting the L button, we turn into that mech for a little brief period of time. And like I said, sometimes punch is all we really need because at least at this stage, we're just knocking enemies off as much as possible. Just do a few more kicks and we have officially reached that 7,000 mark, so I am free to just stop attacking. In fact, it is slightly advantageous to not attack because, I mean, by slight, I mean extremely slight, because we're just trying to not incur any lag frames that we don't need. Alright, Glamour's gonna destroy our ship. We'll jump a couple times and we'll fight a new enemy here. And you'll get to see a sort of linking of a bunch of those things that I was talking about before. We'll start with this punch, hold, punch combo, dash back so we don't have to incur the lag frames, and we'll do that combo one more time. You'll see on the top left-hand side of the screen that that magic bar is going up. And we're going to do that punch, kick combo to get as much magic as humanly possible. He'll strike us again. We're going to do punch one more time. And one more punch, kick to get as much magic as we can. We'll finish off this enemy here. And we're going to actually hold the button longer than we need to, because we're going to want to have at least 4 or 5 magic orbs before we get into the next fight. We're going to want to activate Umbran Climax as fast as humanly possible, but we don't quite have a full magic bar. So by giving ourselves a little bit of a buffer so that we have enough when the fight actually starts, it'll be actually really advantageous for us. Do some mashing. And if you're familiar with Bayonetta 1, you might remember Gamora as your partner from Bayo 1, but in Bayo 2, we'll be fighting quite a few demons, and this is the first one. So like I said, punch, kick, punch. It gives us our Umbran Climax, and now we can absolutely destroy this boss. Normally there's several phases to this fight as he climbs up this building, but because we are able to deal so much damage so quickly, the Gamora simply does not have an option. The game is coded to want to stick around on the lower levels, depending on how much health he has left, and because he literally has no more health left, he's just going to climb up the building unimpeded for the rest of the game. Or for the rest of this fight, rather. Do some shots just to waste a little bit of time. And we will enter our final climax cutscene for the chapter. It's here where in any other marathon setting, I would probably throw it off to a host. And it is a perfect time here to mention that this run was actually accepted into SGDQ 2024. So if you'd like to see that one more time with some added incentives, I would definitely check that out. That should be on the first day of Marathon, June 30th at 11:48 p.m. local time. All right, a little bit of story just to give ourselves a little bit of context. Our friend Jean here has unfortunately lost her soul through the Gamora attack. So we're going to spend the first rather large portion of this game trying to rescue her soul from the depths of hell. All right, and we get to start in Chapter 1. You might remember me mentioning before that we have a sort of tiger attack where we transform into a tiger and then do a bit of a claw slash afterwards. Yes, that is true, but it is also just useful for just movement where we have long stretches of land to traverse. Generally speaking, if you jump and hold your second jump, you will move slightly further. I believe that's general consensus. And as we skip this cutscene, we're going to enter this hallway, jump over this book. I apologize if you're a library enthusiast, but the book will simply just give us more text to read. Bayonetta 2 loves to have these big circular arenas that are quite conspicuous in terms of housing fights. So we're just going to avoid this one by jumping on this pillar and avoiding ever actually going into the area of the circle. Previously, it was thought that doing a bunch of somersaults in this water is a little bit faster, doing a bunch of dodges like this. But because you have to like stop every so often, I've sort of transferred to just moving and running. It looks very slow, I understand, but we prefer what's optimal. All right, so this is our first of 2 shop trips. We'll be buying quite a few things. We'll be buying purple candies, which increase our magic. We'll be buying red candies, which increase our damage, and a few abilities that I will introduce as we go along. First is Falcon, then Umbran Spear, then Hornet Within, and then Witch Twist. Hornet Within is interesting because it gives us a little bit of an extend on our dodge, so we have a little bit of more of a lenient dodge window. But the one that you should really be focusing on right now is the Crow Within ability that I purchased. If you have at least 2 magic orbs in your magic bar, you can transform into the bird and activate what we call the feathers. The feathers just do obscene damage, and it's very strange because the feathers don't do a ton of damage for Bayonetta or John. It's really just Rosa where they're actually advantageous. And you'll see that in action as we come up to the first fight here. Do a couple jumps. All right, there's 1 slash attack, punch, kick, punch. We'll dodge this attack. And then here's our feathers. Completely destroys literally every single enemy on screen. I don't know why they programmed it that way, but I'm not gonna complain. We'll have feathers for this next section here. We'll turn into our mech since we have a full use of our magic bar, and we'll just do a bunch of slams so that we can take out all these small enemies. 1 big enemy will have come in, and you'll see he's already dead. The purpose of that is we actually activated our ring of feathers and then left it on ourselves so that when he spawned in, he would basically be spawn camped with contact damage. You'll see how fearsome they are as we move on to this next fight against Valiance here. Do a little bit of a slash. He'll slash at me. I'll jump, turn into Crow, and watch that health bar absolutely melt away. That's the end of the fight. So yeah, of those 4 or 5 attacks that I said are stringed together in pretty unique ways, turning into a Crow, summoning feathers, and just repeatedly summoning feathers is one of the more advantageous options in our kit.
This is simply the benefit of training.
Hopefully we ended that fight with at least 1 full magic bar, because that means this fight can be taken out in 2 punches. We are going to do a little bit of a weird maneuver there, and I might as well explain it as we're listening to this cutscene with Loki. Yes, the Tiger Within does give you a bit of a speed boost relative to just running on the ground. However, if in any scenario you have access to the mech, and you will not need the mech for future fights, it is advantageous to sort of turn into the mech and use that as your movement. It is significantly faster than the Tiger Within, and, you know, obviously that's faster, but even more importantly, it lets you bypass a lot of other things that the obstacles that the Tiger would have to actually go through. One of the interesting things about the feathers ability is that you can sort of preload feathers into fights. So as we make it over here, we can activate our feathers and have them ready for when enemies do spawn in, so we don't actually have to wait for them. And we're here going to do that punch, punch, dodge back thing I was talking about all the way back in the intro. Lots of enemies, and we want to make sure that we're not actually incurring any lag frames or end lag frames from those punch, punch, punch combos. Here's an example of that. We're going to open this up, and then we're going to turn into the mech. It moves significantly faster, and it has a bigger jump. It has a bigger everything, basically. So we're going to make use of that as we move our way to the first actual boss of this game, Glamour. And if you thought that he looked scary, well, perhaps not after this. We do a dodge, and because of our massive feathers ability, literally his entire health bar is gone in the first phase. The game is a little bit confused, it doesn't really know what to do, so it's just gonna sort of go through its attacking cycles. But once we make our way up to the second phase, we'll just shoot him a little bit, which will say, hey, why don't you actually knock this guy down like I already did? And then we can activate our climax cutscene, and that's the end of the chapter. You might think, perhaps, that it is maybe a little bit boring to just completely eviscerate everything on screen. Maybe you would like a little bit more of a challenge. I understand. I totally understand that. I empathize with that. However, there's a little bit of a power trip that I can go on with this run. Taking out everything extremely quickly is very satisfying, shall we say. All right. As we enter Chapter 2, the first thing we're going to do is head to our left and pick up a big red candy. The size of the candy determines sort of the length of time or the strength of the effect. So, for example, this big red candy that I'm going to pick up in this chest here is going to give us a longer damage boost than a small red candy would. Enter this fight, wait till he attacks, do one of those cougar slashes that I was doing, activate our feathers, take out all these small enemies, run up, slash that final enemy with another claw, and the fight is over. Do a couple jumps because we only have one of our magic bars filled. We didn't want to run over there using the mech because that means we would not have access to the mech to cross the water as such.
Where did you learn that trick, little one? I've never seen a witch or a sage.
So coming up, there's a trick after another fight. There's a trick called Infinite Witch Twist that leads into Chapter 2, Verse 7 skip, basically the 7th fight of Chapter 2. It is rather difficult, and I will explain it if I do get it, but if I don't, I'll save the secret for a little bit later.
It seems.
I mean, no. I got nothing else to say, love.
Open door of the slash, jump, preload our feathers into this fight, and basically spawn camp these two large enemies that will come out of their portals. Not even a problem.
This is simply the benefit of training.
Alright, skip a couple cutscenes, and let's see if we can get this. Very nice. Alright. So, what that did is it let us skip, as you might have guessed, Chapter 2, Verse 7. But how it did it is actually really interesting. That is a trick called Infinite Witch Twist. You might remember me picking it up in our first shopping trip, the Witch Twist ability. Well, it turns out you can actually chain Witch Twist into itself with no lag. And what that means is because Infinite Witch Twist, shoots you up into the air, if you sort of combo Witch Twist into itself, you can gain potentially infinite height. In that particular instance, using Witch Twist at just high enough for Loki to trigger the change in gravity, but not the fight, means that we can skip the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter because the game doesn't know what to load there. We got to skip to the 8th verse instead.
The back page of the classified.
There is going to be... I guess there are going to be 2 more places where Witch Twist will be utilized. One of which is significantly more impressive than the other. Anyway, we are on Chapter 3 right now, and this is by far... Do I want to say it? Do I want to say this? I am going to say it. This is the worst chapter in the game. It consists of one gigantic auto-scroller, and unlike the other boss fights where the game sort of gave us a little bit of leniency, if we took out the boss's health bar early and let us sort of skip some other phases, no such luck with this boss. We're going to have to wait basically for the entirety of the auto-scroller to get to the final fight, and, it's going to be whatever. Like I said, normally I would throw this to a host here, but there are a couple things that we can mention. The reason that we're shooting normal bullets with our Y button instead of any punches or anything like that I would mention before is because we want to sort of subtly rack up our damage meter. Sorry, our magic meter on the top left-hand side of the screen. You see I have 3 orbs currently. I would like to have at least 6 by the time we make it to the final stage. So we're just racking up a little bit of damage with our guns as we go along. You might have also noticed that I took damage, and while I would not call myself the best at this game ever, it's not that was not a mistake either. That damage was by design. You might have noticed every so often that every time I dodged, there's this thing that happens where the world becomes purple and everything slows down. That is what we call witch time. If you dodge at just exactly the right time, you can enter witch time, slows enemies down, and lets you do a lot of damage back to them. If you've ever played Smash 4, this should bring up some unfortunate memories back to you. But even more importantly, it slows down the world. Normally, this is a really good thing. Why would you not want to deal more damage to enemies? However, because we're in an auto-scroller, witch time will slow down the auto-scroller. So it is better to take damage here, because otherwise you're going to be increasing the amount of time that you have to be in the auto-scroller. Which is why we're going to opt for just doing some puny little shots with our Y button instead of doing any actual big damage that we might otherwise be able to do. This thing also has a little bit of stormtrooper aim. If I just move slightly to the left, none of those icicles hit me. So I will take advantage of that, deal a lot of damage there. And you'll see on the top left-hand side of the screen that I do indeed have 6 magic orbs available to me. This means that when the final phase of this auto-scroller occurs in maybe a minute or so, I will be significantly more well-positioned to take it out. He's gonna crash through a gate here. And we're just gonna dodge off to the side and get a little bit more extra damage. Why not? Alright, welcome to the final phase of the auto-scroller. It involves fighting against 3 iterations of Glamour, not just 1. And we have a unique way to take each one of them out. The first one's gonna start with a punch-kick-punch combo, into a dodge, into a Umbran Climax mech instance. There's our punch-kick-punch, there's our dodge, and punch, punch, punch. There's the first one. The second one will be taken out by multiple iterations of punch-kick-punch, along with a witch time dodge. We just want to make sure we get that Umbran Climax mech all the way back up. This final Glamour, the one that we've been fighting since the beginning of the auto-scroller, has an interesting way of taking out of it. For some reason, the game gives you control literally right here before the boss's health bar appears. So we're going to activate one of our first red candies, the ones that increase damage, as well as our Umbran Climax. And we'll just shoot at him, regardless of the fact that there is no health bar there. The game will still deal damage to the Glamour enemy, and as you saw, we were able to finish the phase without actually having to fight him. The health bar was instantly reduced to 0. Do a couple slashes and climax prompts, and that will be the end of Chapter 3.
Can mention here too, if anyone has any questions about the run at all, feel free to put them in the chat, and Variety Pack can answer those for you.
Absolutely. All right, starting Chapter 4, we have our first major boss, Baldur 1, as we like to call him. But there is a little bit of a trick to get there, so we'll start with a little bit of a jump with our Panther as well as a Crow to just get over this little gap here so we don't have to go on the bridge. The bridge does indeed have a trigger to fight, a trigger to start a fight. We're going to activate one of our small purple candies to fill our magic meter about halfway full. I guess not about halfway full, exactly halfway full. And we'll enter a fight with a shield enemy. We're going to activate our feathers, get as much damage on all of these enemies as possible, and that damage that we inflicted with our feathers will get us to the point that we can activate the Umbran Climax, and that'll finish up the fight very quickly.
This is simply the benefit of training.
One more fight against, I think, this is Salt. Salt has the fire punchy hands, and Pepper has the white ones. There will be a fight coming up in Chapter 5 where we fight both Salt and Pepper. Okay. So one of the incentives that I have submitted, although not quite heard back from, for the SGDQ iteration of this run, is that I will be performing 5 of the boss fights blindfolded. Now, in a game that doesn't really give you movement feedback, that may sound a little bit strange, but many of these boss fights, especially on easy mode, are quite scripted. And I'll give you an example as to why. This is Baldur 1. I do a little bit of a run, and with our big red candy, we're just gonna essentially punch, punch, punch with the mech 3 times in a row. Do one small punch to get our Umbran Climax back. Do a couple of uppercuts with Madama Butterfly, and that is literally the end of the first boss fight. So doing them blindfolded can be a little bit tricky if you happen to get off course a little bit, but most of the major boss fights in this game are rather scripted. Think of it as more of a visual spectacle.
Darkness is the absence.
All right, end of chapter 4. And now we enter chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 is the beginning of what I call the bad chapters. Not necessarily just the worst chapter, which is definitely chapter 3. It's the bad chapters. And what I mean by that is they're the ones that have the most RNG in them. Enemies, the time that you get in this game is heavily dependent on the enemy RNG, what attacks the enemies give you, etc. It is extremely obnoxious when you're on a really good paced run and the enemy just does the move that you're like, no, I needed to save time here, and you decided to do that move, how dare you. I currently have a 1 hour, 18 minute and 1 second PB in this run. I have been for several months now trying to get under 1 hour and 18 minutes. And the thing that consistently messes it up, I mean, I'm not completely devoid of blame. I'm sure that I deserve some blame, but a lot of it comes down to enemy RNG. Enemies just give me really bad attacks. They dodge back when they're not supposed to, things like that. And chapter 5 is the first chapter that really has a bunch of those RNG fights in them. So chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 10, and chapter 15 are the ones that I really, really dislike. And I have to do a little bit of discreet hoping. All right, here's a fight against a gear enemy here. And we're going to take him out exactly how we've taken out the other enemies, with a bunch of feathers. You might be wondering, hey, doesn't that get old after a while? And it's hard to describe how the answer is no. The answer is no, and that may feel strange. It's the same way every single time, but it is more satisfying than it is repetitive, I guess is the response that I would give you. All right, you saw me transform into this little snake. I guess they call it Cobra within. And it is probably one of the worst things about the game in the sense that it's really difficult to control. Basically, you need to mash the B button to dash, but also your right thumb, which you're presumably using to dash, is what controls your movement in the water and your direction. So I'm constantly flicking my thumb back from the control stick to the face buttons, and it's just the whole thing. So we only have to use it a couple more times, most particularly in chapter 7.
You still don't know a thing about me.
Let's just say I have plenty of experience with nothing coming to mind.
We have a very long cutscene with Loki here. I'm manipulating the camera a little bit because the camera wants me to constantly focus on Loki and his really drab and boring speech. So what I'm going to be doing is focusing directly ahead of me and jiggling the camera every so often just so I can make sure that the camera stays where I want it to be, not where the game wants it to be. I'm the more important one here.
Come now, little one.
We also want to make sure we get to this orb here as fast as possible so that we don't have any lag time for when Loki is done with the cutscene and when we start the fight. I think this should be good. I was off by just a couple seconds, that's okay. And so this is the first fight that I really, really dislike. This is the first of those RNG fights. Something about the curvature of this battle arena makes it so that enemies don't really know where to spawn sometimes. And that's really obnoxious because sometimes enemies will just fly around like this and just not spawn, causing me to lose a bunch of time. That wasn't too bad, all things considered, but I definitely had better. Yeah, not too bad. 27 seconds is okay. I would prefer somewhere around the 23 range, but what can you do? This will be our one and only time we play as Loki as we jump away from Pepper here. Do a bit of a dodge. When he gets close to us again, we'll use our, in quotation marks, Umbran climax at the bottom of the screen to knock him away from us. And we'll do one more dodge as he climbs away. One more time. At the top of the arena, we'll get to see that Salt and Pepper boss fight that I was alluding to when we were in Chapter 4. This fight is also a little bit of RNG. We want the enemy to do a slam with his fists because that's the fastest thing that gets us to whiff time. Rarely does he do it. Let's see. Nope. I mean, that's not too bad either. I've seen worse attacks for him to give me. Then we want to run over to Pepper here, dodge this first attack, and start spamming those feathers again. Not too bad. Not too shabby.
Nothing can contain me.
Alright, as we make our way into Chapter 6, you're going to notice that there is no cutscene at the start of Chapter 6. Or maybe you wouldn't notice that, because I certainly never notice it. It is the only chapter in this game that does not begin with a cutscene, which is really obnoxious, because sometimes I go to, press the minus button to skip a cutscene, but there is no cutscene. So I enter the menu for 2 seconds, and I lose 2 seconds in my run, and I get mad at myself because it's very obvious that there's no cutscene. Whatever, who cares? This is our main boss fight against Valor. You're going to be noticing a lot of punch, kick, punch. And that's, it does a lot of damage, yes. But the reason we're not turning into the mech is because we want to make sure we actually stun lock him. There's this move that he can do where he leaves the arena and then comes back and instigates a cutscene. That's really, really bad. So to avoid that, we're going to be constantly using punch, kick, punch to keep him in his constant state of being stunned. After this, we're going to take out the enemy in a way very, very similar to how we took out the end of Chapter 3. Just by turning into the mech, activating a red candy, and shooting the hell out of them.
I don't think you'll be able to get a new one of those.
I see a question in chat asking how the boss fights are so short. The feathers are a really big part of that. Feathers just do obscene damage with Rosa, but also the fact that Rosa's damage output is multiplied by 3 from what you might expect from a Bayonetta run. That's just an innate property that the character has. So we're going to be making use of that to absolutely shred boss fights for the remainder of the run.
Darkness triumphs.
I think I also saw another question that was asking, how optimized is this run? That's an interesting question. We're not actually totally sure. There is one other ability that we could potentially purchase in that Chapter 1 shopping trip called Downwards Afterburner Kick. Basically, whenever we're at a high vantage point, if we need to get to the ground really fast, we don't really have a way to do that yet. But there, with a Downwards Afterburner Kick, we could indeed do that. It's a lot more money, and it requires the time that it would take to scroll up to that ability and purchase it. So we're not exactly sure if that's an optimization quite yet. Oh, by the way, there's a giant manta ray on our screen. Sorry, I didn't mention that. This is yet another auto-scroller fight. Basically, it has 3 eyes. You need to take out the first one with some punches and kicks. Dodge few missiles, but very much like Chapter 3, we're going to try to avoid using Witch Time, if at all possible. Again, because it's an auto-scroller, if we use Witch Time, it'll slow down the auto-scroller as well, and we absolutely do not want to see that. Alright, we'll charge one more time. More punch, kick, punch. It'll reel back. We'll do 1 punch and then use 1 instance of our punch, punch, punch combo with our mech. Knock it out of phase 2. Again, swimming past these missiles instead of dodging them. And then we're effectively going to be doing the same thing for the 3rd phase. What's really annoying about fights in which you are not grounded in any way is that you're not actually allowed to turn into the crow. Obviously, we would love to be able to use those feathers for any boss fight that we can, but this is an exception because we're not grounded. There's nothing for the game to say, hey, you are no longer on the ground, so you can turn into the crow. right. This fight is actually very scary on higher difficulties, especially normal and even more so on Infinite Climax, which is this game's obviously hardest difficulty. If you die, which happens in one hit as Rosa, you must start this fight from the beginning again, which can eat up a lot of time. It's very, very risky. Luckily, in Infinite Climax runs, we have access to yellow candies, which make us invulnerable for a little bit. Even so, it's still a dangerous fight if you just happen to get caught off guard. All right, coming up is the reason that I call this one of the badge chapters. This is the next verse with a bunch of small demon enemies. They love to dash back and dodge my feathers. If they do that, it's really bad because I need to get to them to do damage, right? So we're going to really hope that they don't try to run away from me. And hopefully hit them back with feathers. Okay, that wasn't too bad. I've had significantly worse runs than that. If an enemy decides to really run away from me, that last ability that we bought in the shop, that Umbran Spear, will help us close the distance. It lets us shoot ourselves at the enemy, retaining any sort of buffs that we have, including those feathers. Anyway, this is the second boss fight against Baldur. We'll activate a red candy, and we'll do some punches. And we'll do some fancy punches this time. You might notice that I held that first punch out just a little bit longer. I said that the third and final punch of the punch combo for the mech does do double damage, but that's relative to a single punch damage. Both of those first two punches still do have guns if you do hold those buttons out, but we typically don't like to use those because they're less damage. They still do damage though. And if you were to simply just do a hold punch combo for that last phase of Baldur 2, what would happen is you would be left with a sliver of health, and what you would have to do is just do like one extra little punch. We've determined that it is slightly faster to hold that first punch out of the combo instead of, having to wait until the end of the combo and then do one final punch to finish them off.
This is simply the benefit.
All right, so Chapter 8 is home to that infinite witch twist thing that I was talking about before. We saw it before used in Chapter 2, verse 7 skip, but we're going to be seeing it used a lot more. There's a running section and a fight that we really want to skip because it's just way too much time watching all of those cutscenes and stuff like that. So we're going to be chaining Infinite Witch Twist into itself a lot. It's going to take probably around 20 seconds. I'm going to hush for a little bit while I try not to mess it up. All right, we'll take it. So that was the Infinite Witch Twist chain, the longest one in the game. You might be wondering why we don't use that more often. That seems really broken, doesn't it? You are correct. It does seem really broken. I wish we could use it more. It's really, really cool to show it off. Unfortunately, though, it's just the case that a lot of the times you have faster movement options. There's not really too many really big gaps or anything like that. So generally speaking, only in big areas like that, which are very rare, will be used Infinite Witch Twist. This fight will start us off with a bunch of small enemies. Go ahead and use our punch combo with the mech. And then there's going to be a sword enemy. These sword enemies are very dangerous if you just attack them with normal Rosa, so we're going to activate Armored Climax just to close that gap a little bit. Alright, if we jump in very specific places here, Loki will activate the portal immediately. Nah, he didn't this time. We're going to have to wait a little bit. Please, thank you. On this little road here with all these crystals, we're going to specifically avoid the darker crystals. There's a red one that comes in Chapter 9 as well. What those do is, they're not bad. They're not going to, harm you or anything, but they will harm your time. They give you just a little bit of extra text, much like the books do whenever you pick them up. Activate this little switch. And Loki's going to sort of reverse the turns of time or something to that effect. I'm not much of a lore buff. I know the story very generally, but it has been quite a while since I've looked at anything specific about this game's story. Alright, we're also going to preload our feathers into the next fight as soon as we see the saving prompt. Loki will open the portal, and we're going to take out these guys exactly the same way that we took them out in Chapter 2. Basically, spawn camp them. You might call that dirty or toxic. I call it efficient.
This is simply the benefit of
Preload some more feathers, because we're going to have a little bit of an aquatic fight here. And like I said, when you're in an area that doesn't let you ground yourself, the game also doesn't let you turn into the crow. So we're going to make sure that we preload our feathers before we enter the water, so that's not a concern for us.
nothing can
I see a question about this game being Switch exclusive. It is not. It is also available on the Wii U. Although, let's be honest here. If you have a Switch, you might as well play it on the Switch.
Try to keep up.
Alright, we have a little bit of a run from Gollum here. And we're going to be using that property of the mech that I said before. It just moves faster than the tiger within. So we'll turn to the mech. We'll have a little bit of magic left over for the final fight. And we don't have to waste, I think, 2.5 seconds is what we calculated from just using the panther instead. I call it a panther because that's what it is for Bayo, but it's tiger technically.
This is simply the benefit of training.
Right then.
One more fight here. Do our classic spawn camping, do a dodge, and that's the fight.
Darkness is the absence
That was
of
easy.
light.
Okay. The game just did not want to give me the prompt. There's that darker red crystal that I was talking about before. Definitely don't want to get that. Alright, pretty good chapter 8, all things considered.
That performance might make the back page of the classified.
A lot of mashing at the end for the verse cards. And then we begin chapter 9. Actually, do this by the two, I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to find out. Alright, like I said all the way back in chapter 1, a lot of the fights in this game are in very conspicuous circular arenas, and the next one is no exception. We're going to be doing something very similar to what we did before. We're sort of go around it instead of through it. That'll let us skip the fight and be on our merry way. Jump. Jump. For some reason the fight doesn't trigger there. Good jump. And we will make our damage even more obscene by picking up yet another big red candy there. You might remember that I said that these sword enemies are really bad when you're fighting against them with Rosa, and that still reigns true. Luckily, that fight is fairly scripted. He will always do that attack if you end before him. Sorry, if you end behind him, rather. Dodge one attack and take out Pepper with a couple feathers. You know, as speedrunners, we can do our best to make things... Are you actually serious? We can do our best to make things as, consistent as possible, but, when you speedrun a game, you take them as they are, right? Can't complain too much. Alright, for this fight, we're going to activate a big red candy and completely destroy Gollum's health bar. It's just obscene. You are already familiar with the idea that feathers do a ton of damage because of Rosa, but imagine the feathers also with a red candy boost. It's just ridiculous. We'll see that trick used one more time, and we really only reserve it for enemies that have really big health bars. There's an added benefit for us using it this time, though. The added benefit is that in cutscenes, the timer of that damage boost does not disintegrate. So we actually still have that damage boost in the profit fight, and it should carry us all the way to the end of the chapter. Do a couple punches, and then we activate phase 2, which is just phase 1 but repeated, at least with our string. Umbring Climax, punch. Ooh. I don't know if you saw that. He dodged me. He rarely dodges me. He's playing some tricks on me today. Alright. coming up is Chapter 10, and if you remember, Chapter 10 is another chapter that I consider to be just bad because of all of the RNG elements. It doesn't start off too bad. We just do a bunch of centipede dodging. That might sound confusing, I realize. In retrospect, you'll see what I mean. We'll do a couple jumps. And we enter a little bit of an auto-scroller phase with some centipedes. I believe that if you're playing as Jeanne and you decide to use the Cobra within that snake in the water, this is the form that she turns into. It's a little bit less palatable, shall we say, than the Cobra, but it's cool. I'll give it that. So, our first little bit of RNG in this fight, in this chapter rather, comes at the bottom of this little centipede well. There's a giant spider crab named Phantasmorne, and we would love to see it shoot a fireball or shoot a web at us. Either one of the two. Fireball is still pretty good. Lets us dodge immediately and give us enough magic so that we can start spamming those feathers. Very, very fast. Good. Shooting the webs is slightly slower, but not by enough of a margin for me to care. There is one move that he can do, where he burrows into the ground. If he burrows into the ground, your run is over. Or at least it would be for me. It just loses, I think, around 10 seconds, and that's just not a deficit that I have the leisure to simply incur. Alright, we have some fights here, and we will be making use of that Umbran Spear ability this time. Remember, that Umbran Spear ability lets us sort of get from one enemy to the other really, really quickly. And that's really useful because, like I said, all the way back in Chapter 7, these little demon enemies love to just dodge away from us, and we absolutely do not want to see them. That enemy is called Resentment, I believe, and Resentment does this really annoying thing. Not only does he one-hit kill you, he one-hit kills you, and also makes you, like, walk around as a child for 10 seconds before killing you. So not only is it a death which kills your run, it doubly kills your run, because it also wastes 10 seconds. Luckily, our Umbran Climax is so strong that his magical abilities cannot actually be activated on it. So we have effective immunity to it as the Umbran mech. Coming as the fight against Sloth, which is very ironically named. He's, I believe, the fastest enemy in the game. So we'll activate some feathers and do one of our classic punch, punch, punch combos. Take him out pretty quickly. Now, unfortunately, this is the reason that this chapter is bad. Coming up, we have a fight where we tag team with Rodan. Rodan is obviously the most powerful entity that we know of in the Bayonetta universe, and he's going to help us out in this next fight. Unfortunately for us, the manner in which he helps us is extremely inconsistent from run to run. I currently, in my PB, lost 11 seconds relative to my gold, almost 12 seconds, honestly. And every single time I get here, I ask to save at least some of those 12 seconds, and very rarely does he appease me. So we're going to do our best to help him out, take as many enemies as we can. We really want him to see big moves like the one he just used on bigger enemies instead of smaller enemies, because we can take out the smaller enemies. We want him to take out the bigger enemies. Unfortunately, you can't get everything you want, so we'll do our best, but there is no guarantees. That was pretty good, took a lot of enemies. This guy's being a little bit stubborn. One enemy sort of floating off to the side. Good. Alright, so there will be 3 sort of wolfish enemies appearing. Okay, he took out, it looks like one of them. I would have preferred him to take out all 3, but you know, I'll take one, I guess. Then there's going to be 2 gear enemies. We would love to see him do a stomp and take out both of them at once. Okay, he didn't do the stomp, he did a punch, but I will absolutely take that. That's really, really good.
We're here, and so is my target by the looks of it.
Alright. Got a little bit of a cutscene here.
There she
Take a moment to
is.
stretch.
Hold up. You're not seriously thinking of getting between a man and his next payday? Chill, Bayonetta. Don't go shooting up my target, you dig? I need that one.
So you run the other characters slash categories too, right?
Minimally. Actually, the Bayonetta run hurts my hands too much. There's a lot of mashing and button holding and stuff like that. My hands are pretty small, so the reason.
I was gonna ask if this was just your favorite of the categories that you run for it.
Yeah, it is my favorite, and also the only one I can really do. The reason I picked it up in the first place, I was like, oh, it's shorter. Maybe that'll be better in my hands. And I'm glad I tried it out because it's really fun, and I don't have to wear a hand brace after I do it.
That's usually a good thing, yeah.
Yeah. All right, this is all run, and I wish I could tell you that we're doing anything particularly special against her, but nope. Punch, punch, punch. And after that, in the second phase, we're just going to spam some feathers. In particular, for that first instance of the feathers that we did, we still have access to that red candy buff, so those feathers are particularly strong. Not so anymore. Unfortunately, I know that I said that cutscenes make it so that the red doesn't actually deplete at all, but this is sort of an in-game cutscene where we still have control, so it's not quite the same. All right, a couple more rings of feathers should finish her off, and we're moving on to Chapter 12. And before Chapter 12, we're going to do our second and final shopping trip. Not nearly as intense this time. We're going to be basically refilling our candies. And yes, they will last us until the very end of the run. You saw me being very deliberate with my button presses there. I do not trust, I love the Pro Controller. I love the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. It's a great controller. The issue is, man, its D-pad has some problems.
It's so bad.
Which is really unfortunate, because otherwise it would be in contention for one of the best controllers, but it sucks. So I am very, very deliberate with my button presses. I do not want to hit start of the chapter without actually getting those candies, otherwise the run is unfortunately dead. All right, so we got a little bit of an auto-scroller here. I mean, it's kind of an auto-scroller. It's weird to call it an auto-scroller because we are technically holding up on the controller to make us go faster. So it's on rails, but I guess I would hesitate to call it an auto-scroller. Anyway, the point is we're riding on Diomedes here to help Loki, who is currently facing off against Baldur right now. We've already saved Jean, by the way, if you were wondering how the story was holding up, for those of you curious about the speedrun story. I did something very embarrassing here, like a couple days ago, where I just literally fell off this cliffside and had to start this section over again, which, obviously killed the run, but I don't think ever done that. Do a couple jumps. And we'll be moving on to basically the only real strategy portion of this, which is how we utilize our Umbran Climax. We're going to have two enemies appear in a pair, and what we're going to do is activate our Umbran Climax and take out the first enemy, but we're going to actually keep the Umbran Climax going until the second enemy appears. Normally, what I would do on a grounded level is simply activate the Umbran Climax, kill the enemy, and retract the Umbran Climax. But we want to keep the Umbran Climax this time because we only have one magic bar. And remember, if we don't have a full magic bar, we can't use the Umbran Climax again. So because we are cognizant of where the enemies are going to spawn, we're going to utilize that fact. And we're going to take out the first enemy, wait as our Umbran Climax drains, and then use it again to take out the second enemy. Do some perfect dodges here. That was not a perfect dodge, but close enough. And we're going to do it again right here. Flash. Wait, 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 wait. It's getting close, but there it is. We'll do that second slash and take him out. After this, we have our final fight against Baldur. And this one is a little bit tricky, but not for the reason that you might expect. I'll tell you what I mean in a second. All right, red candy, purple candy. Summon some feathers, and summon a mech. That's basically the strategy. What's hard about it is the health bar. We need to make sure that the enemy has a little bit of health at the very end of the first phase into the second phase. If you are a little bit too gregarious and you actually reduce all of the... oh, he's dodging me. If you reduce the health bar to 0 before the second phase will start, but the boss won't be there. The game will say, hey, you beat the boss, but not the arena. So you will be soft locked if that happens. Nothing you can do but start again. All right. Chapter 13. I believe I golded this in my PB, so this is going to be very, very tough to keep up with. It's a very, very long chapter. Lots of very small fights. And ironically, I think you're starting to get the idea that the smaller fights, the fights against these littler enemies, the one with more things that can go wrong, are significantly more dangerous in this run than any big enemy ever could be, which is ironic, compared to a casual playthrough. But there's so many things that can go wrong. Enemies can go flying in the wrong place. Enemies will do stuff that you don't want them to. They'll dodge in places that you don't want them to. And this is a great example of that. Sometimes the enemies will just not do what you want them to. They'll spawn in places like this, where we want to actually get to this enemy instead. And we have a lot of small head angels to take out. It's really rough. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Then we're going to have a fight against a big guy here, which I am presently forgetting the name of. But that's fine. 2, 3. Ooh, I didn't get as much as I wanted to there. This should still be fine, I believe. Yeah. That's fine. Unfortunately, that does mean that I did lose a little bit of time because I wasn't able to get 4 rings of feathers before he dashed off, but that's totally fine. It loses about 3 to 4 seconds. And that's the first fight of the chapter. Well, I guess not technically the first fight of the chapter. Weirdly enough, actually, this none of the Bayonetta games have a 100% category, one where you collect everything and complete all the verses. There's only speed challenges. That is to say, we only have to beat the game as fast as possible. We don't really have a category that is intended to complete everything. There have been runners that have tried this in the past. I believe Ace Krona is the most recent one for Bayonetta 2. But yeah, it would be interesting. I think it would be arguably fun, but it would definitely be interesting to see what different fight tactics we have to employ when you're so overpowered by the end. Alright, we're going to pick up yet another big red candy in this chest to the side. And coming up, I'm sorry to say, is going to be our last instance of the infinite climax, if that was your favorite trick in the game. To the right-hand side of this arena, there's a statue, and if you remember from Bayonetta 1, you can activate these statues to slow down time, so you can run across surfaces and whatever. We will be using one of those later in the chapter, but for now, it's just a little bit too slow for our blood, so we're going to make sure we use a couple witch twists to get us over there. Should be good? Good. Some enemies will spawn. We'll take out the first set with feathers, and then the last one with a punch. Oh, he survived. That's rare. If he does survive like that, that means I positioned it wrong. Generally speaking, we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves for the mech in such a way where we see both of them sort of linearly to us, instead of sort of at an angle. Coming up, we're going to meet our adversary here, and we're going to start with just his hand. We're going to jump in such a place where he hits all of our feathers, and we can do one more sort of expulsion of those feathers to take out that first phase. Very, very good. Here's that statue I was talking about. We're going to activate it a little bit, and we're hopefully going to have enough time to make it all the way across this falling bridge here. This looks to be okay. And then we meet our adversary for the second time. 2 rings of feathers should take out that hinge. Just in the nick of time. Do some jumps on here. And then there is a couple ways that we can do this next skip. The faster way is to use the mech and do a long jump across a chasm. It is very... I could not tell you why, but I am just literally the worst at that trick, so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to take it the slow way and sort of do it the game's intended way. In this chest, there is a small a big purple candy, actually, which we'll use for the final fight of the game. And you might remember me saying a while back that it would be insane for us to use both feathers and a red candy. Well, here's another example of that. This enemy, our adversary, our final boss fight against the adversary, has just a ton of health. So to make it expedient, we're actually going to use an entire red candy to take him out quickly. There are ups and downs to that. There are fights that come later in the game, particularly in Chapter 16, where it might be beneficial, actually, to have a red candy, but this fight can go so wrong, and it's worth using a red candy here, especially because he can do this thing, like other fights in this game, that he just leaps away from you for no reason. Very obnoxious. As we move on, we'll move on to Chapter 14. And you might remember me saying that if you had a mech and then you activated your Umbran Climax, then you would get Super Mech. And this is the only place we're going to be seeing our Super Mech. But it'll be a spectacle, I promise. You're going to see a bunch of big enemies and they're all going to go down like butter. You know, as fast as butter can. Alright, this is arguably the most difficult fight of the chapter. You need to make sure that you're trapping these enemies in the correct places so that they actually take all your damage. That did not happen that time, unfortunately. So we're going to pop our Umbran Climax just to really take him out with great certainty. Otherwise, things could get really bad. This should be fine, yeah. That was not the fastest I've ever done that, but it should be fine. We're going to rush over. And actually, this means that I have more magic than I used to. Let's see if we can make use of it. We'll dodge a couple of these so we can get some extra magic for the next fight. I'm not used to doing this fight this way. I guess we'll see if I like it. Yeah, it takes those out very quickly. In this fight, even though we see the Umbran Climax prompt, we're going to resist using it because we want to have as much magic as possible for the next fight against Sapentia. Sapentia... Oh, I guess I did not mention Chapter 14 as one of the bad chapters. Yeah, Chapter 14 is extremely a bad chapter. There's just so much enemy RNG that can completely ruin your run. Sapentia is a good example of that. This enemy that we saw on the left there just briefly. Basically, if he does this attack where he either dashes back or dashes to the side, your run is not over. There are ways to get back to him, but it looks grim when he does that because you need to rush over there to get him. That's not a great attack, because that means I'm actually going to be behind him, and I would rather not be. Alright, that's fine. He did not do any attacks that made it so that he was not within my vicinity, so I'll absolutely take that. It could have been a little bit better. There's one attack that we love to see where he does 2 claw swipes. That's what we would prefer to see. But, no, in this case, for a showcase run, we'll take what we can get. This is Worship, which is very aptly named. It is a warship, and it has 1 health bar, but it's separated into like 3 small phases. Each one of these phases take up 25% of his health, and the remainder takes 50. We're going to be extremely wary of any time the game wants us to sort of shoots us backwards, because that means we can't do our punch, punch, punch combo. So we want to make sure we have a little bit of our Umbran Climax on reserve, just in case that happens, because punch, punch, punch is obviously going to be more powerful than anything else that, you know, exists for us in this game. Do a dodge, punch, 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 do a ton of damage with Umbran Climax, and we're hopefully going to be able to get enough magic. No, we didn't. That should be okay. We have a fight against Justitia coming up, and it would be better to have full magic, because that means we can actually do the strat that we want to use. It's not the end of the world. I think I'll be able to get a full bar of magic before we actually have to do the Umbran Climax, but we'll see. Do a lot of shooting. Okay, we're fine. Bam the shoot button, as we have for a lot of other flying enemies in this game. And that's the end of Chapter 14. Pretty good. Alright, Chapter 15 is coming up, and you might remember me saying it's one of the bad chapters. And that's not really much to do with a lot of the stuff until the end. There's this one fight at the end with Grace and Glory, who you'll definitely remember if you've played Bayonetta 1, and they like to dash back and do a bunch of terrible things, so hopefully we don't get to that point. This is the gauntlet that comes at the very beginning. want to make sure we're as expedient with this as possible. The difficult thing about the gauntlet is that we actually need to not just take out the big enemies, but the small little enemies that come to the side as well. Taking out the small enemies is what actually gives us the ability to face the bigger enemies. So we need to be pretty careful that we're managing all of the enemies on screen. Like that one right there. It was just hidden away a little bit. Yeah, they're dodging away from me. Definitely don't want to get hit by the bite attack. That bite attack is really bad because it, wastes time because he likes to wrangle you in his mouth a little bit. Even though this is technically an auto-scroller, it is better to incur a little bit of witch time dodge there because, the alternative is you have to sit there and watch or be eaten for 3 seconds, and no one wants that. All right. Pretty good. After this, we have a fight against old Noodle Fingers. We wanted to use not that attack, preferably, but that's fine. He'll be knocked down, and we'll just take him out with a couple more rings of feathers. And then we have actually kind of a difficult fight against a bunch of smaller enemies on screen here.
This is simply the benefit of training.
If the enemies decide to be a little bit mean and not be in my vicinity of feathers, then things can go very badly very quickly. We're going to hope that that's not the case. Sort of make sure we use our contact damage as much as possible. Okay, that wasn't too bad. What's really obnoxious about that fight is that you'll see that there's some snake enemies coming to hit us. And sometimes your attacks can be redirected to the snakes when you really don't want them to. It's pretty unfortunate when that happens. And in fact, I was doing practice runs today, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was right there, I was a little bit ahead, and unfortunately, yeah, it just so happens that my punch, kick, punch attacks were directed towards the snake enemies far off in the distance instead of the enemy that was literally right in front of me. You can't have everything you want, I suppose. All right. Oh, that was the boss, by the way. I guess I probably should have said that. Yeah, bosses die very quickly in this game, and even though the cutscenes are big and flashy, it's no match for the 3 times damage dealing Rosa. So this fight that I'm coming up to is by far the worst fight in the chapter. If Grace and Glory decide to sort of dash away from me and run away from me, things can go bad really quickly. Like that. Okay, not bad. Okay, I've had worse. I'll take it. Yeah, them dodging back is really, really, really bad. Definitely don't want to
This is simply the benefit of training.
deal with that. Okay. That's the end of chapter 15, and then presumably you've been, following along with me. Yeah, feathers, I got it. Punch, 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 got it. Punch, kick, punch, got it. I got all of those things. I'm going to completely flip the script on you now. This is chapter 16, which we start on a giant plane. Now, if you've played Bayonetta 1 before, this may give you some unfond memories, shall we say, because of the Isla del Sol chapter, where you're on a missile that does full barrel rolls when you try to dodge. It was very obnoxious in Bayonetta 1, but luckily they learned their lesson, and now when you dodge, the entire screen does not flip over. The name of the game here is we're trying to do these charged sword attacks with Baldur, who is also with us. That gives a little bit more magic than if we were to just simply destroy the enemies normally. Also has the added benefit of being faster. The reason that we want to make sure that we kill as many as possible is because there's a fight that comes after this glamour fight, and we would love to have 2 full magic bars. It's hard to get that, but if you can, it's definitely worth it. We'll activate one of our red candies here to take out glamour. And that might seem strange because, his health isn't that much. He clearly seemed to be very powerful with Baldur. The reason for it is a lot of these enemies love to dash backwards, and, Baldur's sword doesn't have range if he is using the Umbran Climax. The issue is that if he does not have Umbran Climax, the only way to hit him is with Rosa's bullets, and Rosa's bullets just don't do as much damage as we'd like them to. So we want to make sure that we take out these bigger enemies as quickly as humanly possible. I've been asked if this is an auto-scroller before, and it's a hard question because yes, it is, but also it depends on how well you do on some of these fights, so it's a bit of an interesting question. Here's that fight I was talking about. We want to make sure that we have full magic so that we can activate our second Umbran Climax so that he doesn't, stay back there when we don't have Umbran Climax anymore. That would be really, really, really bad. Because then we'd have to mash the Y button with Rosa, and, my thumbs are tired. I don't want to do that. All right, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, but instead of the angelic enemies, we have the devil enemies this time. And the name of the game is the exact same. We are trying to attack with our charged attack because we want to make sure we have 2 full magic bars for the Insidious fight at the end of this chapter, or at least the end of the section of the chapter, which, as you might remember, is that giant sort of manta ray that we fought in Chapter 7. And I'm just missing all of these guys because, of course. We should be good on magic, though. I'm not super concerned. And there he is. Three, 4, 5. Do the same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Deactivate the climax, and so we can finish that last little bit off of the health with a normal shot by Rosa. The reason being is that we want to make sure we have at least one full magic bar by the end of this little segment here. Reason being is that we're going to want to make sure we have 2 full magic bars before we get to the fight with Aesir, the final boss. And we definitely don't want to waste any space. All right, give us ourselves our big purple candies in our equip slots this time. Skip 3 cutscenes and make our way to Aesir, the final boss. Now, I wish I could tell you that we would be employing some really intense and important strats for this final boss fight. It is the final boss fight after all, but I think you're well aware as to what our strategy is going to be. There is actually a small thing that we need to be very careful of here. If we don't take him out fast enough, what he can do is he can enter like a little bit of a cutscene where he starts summoning planes at us. That's just really, really bad. It just wastes like 10 seconds immediately. So luckily we took out his health fast enough to where that was not a problem. More spectacle cutscenes, what can you say? We'll activate our final big purple candy, and you'll see that we managed our red candy such that we actually still have it at the very end of the fight. It lasts just enough time to last us through the entire fight. If we were just a little bit slower, we would have been screwed, but that's why I felt comfortable using that first red candy against Glamour in the beginning of Chapter 16. That would be impossible otherwise. In fact, I used to reserve 2 red candies for the Aesir fight when I was, starting off with this run, because what if I'm slow? What if I don't do enough damage? Other questions like that. So it was good to have on reserve, but I'm a professional now. There's no reason for me to be so cautious. A note for tech as we continue along this run. We have completed the final boss, and you will see credits start to roll. That is not the end of the run. The rules of this speedrun, I think, are very natural. You stop the run when you lose control of the character, and you have control of the character in the credits. So we'll be playing through the credits. I might as well make my shoutouts and stuff then, and then we'll finish it off with one final fight to give us our final time. do some mashing. And that is the end of ACR. Very fast, very good chapter 16. Very happy with it, all things considered.
Nothing can contain me.
Skip a couple cutscenes, and here begins the credits. Again, please do not stop the timer.
Dance, boys.
All right, so the credits. Why do we have to play them? As I alluded to before, we have control, but that's not really a justification on its own. The really big reason is because the final sort of section of the credits lets you control, and that's the last one. So we need to finish that fight as fast as possible because, you know, otherwise that's the last thing in the credits that's actually going to increase our time at least a little bit. All of the stuff that we're currently doing now, it's essentially just auto-scroller stuff. It doesn't really matter how much we do. In fact, because the rule is you stop the timer when you lose control of the character, on hard mode and infinite climax mode, what often happens is that we'll actually just die on purpose. We'll take a hit on the final fight because it's faster. We don't have to fight the enemies. We just need to die from the enemies. So because we take so much damage, it is in fact more optimal to just simply take the damage in infinite climax mode. I will also say, as I said, since we're here, might as well do it. I hope you all enjoyed this run. It was a blast. It went really well. I'm very happy about it. Lots of really great runners for this event. In, I guess, solidarity of AAPI month, it's a really great opportunity. There's a ton more stuff that's coming up. Hollow Knight, I know Super Mario Wonder's on the list too, so please make sure to follow those runners, check those runners out, watch their runs here. It's been a blast, and I'm sure you'll have a blast as well. Any notes from host as we wrap up here?
Yes, please make sure you follow A_variety_pack. That is twitch.tv/A_variety_pack. Please do so. If you enjoyed this run at all, be sure to drop a follow. And yeah, keep watching. We'll have a lot more coming. And I'm really excited to see the final moments of this run.
Yes, we're not quite done. We still have a little bit more to go. Taking out these enemies, you know, again, doesn't super matter. We're still in auto-scroller mode, but there's 2 more fights, and after those 2 fights, we will be done with the run. Thanks for sticking with me. I know that auto-scrollers are never fun, least of all for me, if I may say so myself, but we manage. At least they give us, you know, something to do during the credits. It's not just a bunch of credits and then just one fight at the end that you have to do. That would be really annoying. One attack that the mech has that we did not see that I might as well show off is Spin Kick. It's not that good of a move if we've pretty much optimized everything we need to, but Spin Kick will absolutely just kick off these enemies. And, oh, I didn't do it that last time, but that's okay. There we go. All right, one more fight to go, and that's it. One thing that we've been doing so far is sort of building up our magic, because we're going to be using this thing called Bullet Climax, which basically shoots really high-powered bullets at enemies off the screen. So after we take our first realm of enemies, we're going to make sure to just do that to make sure that all the enemies are knocked off at the very end. I'll let you know when time is. It's really hard to say, but hopefully you can stick with me. All right, here we go. Do some bullet climax. That time.
GG.
All right. Thank you very much. Looks like my time was just over my PB. That's exactly what I expected. It was a very good run. It would be foolish of me to complain, but thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the run, and stick around for more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Variety Pack. Again, be sure to drop a Variety Pack a follow on Twitch. We're not done yet today. Again, this is just day 1 too, so we have day 2 as well. Plenty more runs coming up celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. A lot of cool stuff coming up, but up next we have Hollow Knight by Kuroshi94, so stay tuned. We'll be back in just a little bit.